Hello, I'm Jeff Small, and I'm excited to guest host this very special edition of The Income Generation. Today we're celebrating some of the best interviews from the show, including some of my own interviews from when I've had the pleasure of being your guest host in the past. It's hard to believe we've aired more than 115 episodes of The Income Generation, featuring some of the best financial minds of our time. Through it all, we've always had one goal, and that's helping you protect your hard-earned money and save for retirement. It's time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts that matter to you, the income generation.
Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies and new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional style investing to your portfolio.
In January, we celebrated our 100th episode of The Income Generation. Since then, we forged ahead with new episodes aimed at keeping you informed about new developments in the financial markets and what you need to know to make smart decisions in today's new age of economic uncertainty. This week, we want to take a look back and remember some of our best guests, topics, and episodes. It was no easy task narrowing down the choices, but our main goal was to make sure we came up with another episode packed with insights and information still relevant and valuable to you. Today, we'll revisit several topics, including personal finance, the psychology of money and investing, retirement health and medical expenses, the financial media, corporate buybacks and debt, and of course, the ever-changing financial markets. Let's kick things off with some of our best discussions on the very important topic of personal finance. There's a phrase David likes to use a lot on this show, and that's, "Don't try this at home." He uses it to stress the point that the kinds of income-based financial strategies that he and I recommend for investors in or near retirement aren't easy. There's no cell phone app that allows you to actively manage a diversified portfolio of individual bonds. That takes a financial professional who specializes in income-generating strategies. However, there are things you can and should be doing on your own to help safeguard your financial future and achieve your retirement goals. I cover a lot of these topics in my book, an Amazon #1 bestseller called Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up. We've also focused on this topic in a number of shows dealing with personal finance and through guests who've offered a wealth of guidance on how to be a good steward of your own hard-earned money. One of those was the pit bull of personal development, himself, Larry Wingate, the host of A&E's Big Spender. Larry shared his thoughts on a personal financial challenge faced by many baby boomers today, forcing growing children to become financially independent.
And here's the biggest problem I'm seeing is that people want to retire more simply, and they do want to cut back on all those other kinds of expenses. However, I saw a study recently that said that almost 2/3 of baby boomers, people approaching retirement, some of them already in retirement, are financially supporting their millennial children in some way. So the first thing that you have to shed is the dependent children that are grown and should be taking care of themselves. That would be where I would start.
Now, some would say to you, gosh, Larry, that's easier said than done. You know, Papa might say, kick the kids out of the house so we can go on more cruises, but Mama's going to say, there are kids, we're not going to do that. So,
Mama's wrong.
Okay, that's simple. Mama's wrong. Well,
Mama's wrong. Here's the deal. The goal of parenting is for them to go away. So you should have raised your kids with the ability to thrive and survive on their own at some point in their life. And to support them while sacrificing your own retirement, I think is sad and does your kids a disservice.
Sure.
And it does a disservice to your spouse who you worked hard to get to the place where you're finally able to say, let's not go to work anymore. Let's not we're not in a place where we can bring in any new revenue, generate any new revenue, and we're going to enjoy our lives. And you can't do that when you have so many things that are dragging you down. And that's just a place to start.
Fair enough. Providing the children don't have any disabilities of sorts, you can push them out, kick them out of the nest, if you will, make them fly on their own, and they might be stronger because of it. But how about the members of the sandwich generation who have the opposite problem, who are caring for parents? You know, in the 60 seconds or so we have left in the segment, how do you handle that? That's not as easy.
That's not as easy. That really isn't as easy, and I will totally agree with you on that. I'm much more sad for people who are that sandwich generation, and they're stuck between both sides, and now they're stuck with aging parents, and they have to do whatever it takes. And that's your mom and your daddy out there. You need to do what it takes. You know, there's only two ways to have more money, and that's increase income or decrease expenses. So you're going to have to go somewhere else to offset your expenses so you're able to take care of your aging parents.
We've also had mortgage and investing strategist Chris Hogan join us a few times on this show. He's the author of Everyday Millionaires, and he's always has budgeting advice to help you, especially if you're at or near retirement. However, he's warning that not enough people are taking budgeting seriously.
I tell people it'll take you around 3 months to get budgeting down pat, but don't let that prevent you from starting and having an understanding of your income as well as all of your expenses.
Yeah, if you don't know what your goal is in terms of monthly expenditures, you can't hit it, right? You can't hit a goal that you can't see. But why is it that so few actually do it? Is it because they hate math, or is it much deeper than that, as I suspect?
Well, I think, in talking to people in the over 20 years I've been dealing with money, I've really heard a lot of different stories, or as I like to call them, a lot of different excuses. But it really boils down to a couple of things. People either don't have the knowledge, and that means they don't know the steps or the process to go by, or they have fear. They're scared to do it because they've never done it before. And so it really boils down to people beginning to get the right kind of information and learning the steps to take. Like, it doesn't take a computer software to prepare a budget. You don't have to have highfalutin, powerful computer. What you need is a pencil and a piece of paper and having knowledge of your numbers, your income as well as your expenses, and really sitting down and understanding this, David. I want you to tell your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. That's a quote by John Maxwell. I absolutely love it, because what it does is it gives us back control. And when we have control, we can have confidence in what we're doing.
So part of it is maybe fear. They don't know how to go about doing the budget. They think it's more complicated. But do you think some people feel constrained by a budget, and maybe baby boomers don't want to be constrained? Do you think that may be part of the issue, at least with the baby boomer generation, or the income generation, as we've now come to call it here on Newsmax television?
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's actually the third. That feeling constraints. A lot of people have told me that a budget feels like handcuffs. They go, Chris, I don't want to do it because it tells me what I can't do. And the reality is it's actually the opposite. When you have a budget, as my friend Rachel Cruz says, it gives you permission to spend. That means you're able to do something without the regret or without the fear in the background, because you've allocated money aside to be able to do it. So now when you do that thing, you're able to enjoy it instead of feeling like you're going to have regret later or feeling buyer's remorse.
Yeah, so it sounds like control. On one hand, they feel like, oh, if I have a budget, something else is controlling me. But what you're saying is essentially, if you have a budget, then you're controlling where your dollars are going.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's so vital and so important, because when people feel in control, they can keep their hands on the steering wheel, as I like to say. And so really, it's a matter of understanding the budget is your friend, and it's a living, breathing thing. You don't want to do a budget at the beginning of the month and just set it aside. We want to do the budget, but also make sure that you're checking in on it. Are you staying on track? Are you spending what you said you were going to spend? And it allows us to make adjustments midstream. And so it's a lot like in a game. I'm a former athlete. Every coach comes out and they have a game plan. But in the middle of the game, you have to make some adjustments based on what your opponent is doing.
Right.
Well, in life will bring you some things. And so you need to be able to make adjustments. So keep your hands on your budget, stay in control, and then that way you can plan for things and not have things come up and surprise you.
Having a good budgeting plan can help you prevent debt, or even help you get out of debt. It certainly helped Kirstie and CMU Banner. They're a married couple who spoke with David last year. They told him how they were able to get out of $50,000 worth of debt in just their first 15 months of marriage.
So when you came into the relationship with debt, Who had the debt? That was you?
Yep.
That was you?
Was me.
Was the shoe collection, let me see there, is it shoes? Is that what it is?
No, it was a car, student loans, all kinds of other stuff.
All kinds of other stuff, okay. So now how far into the relationship, Sam, did you figure out that this debt existed?
Within the first month of us dating, actually, because I was teaching a financial class helping people in our community eliminate debt. And I would meet with Kirstie on our date nights, and it just opened for a good conversation. How did your Tuesday night go? Well, this is what we discussed in class, and just kind of gradually made our way into that conversation because.
So you were subtle about bringing into a new relationship, which is good.
Yeah.
And how did you accept that?
I thought it was awesome. It was funny because I had actually gone through a similar course to the one that he was teaching prior to meeting him. Didn't quite grasp it, but I was already familiar with the concept. So I thought it was interesting to meet him, and he was so enthusiastic about it. I thought, like, okay, this would be helpful in really getting on track this time.
Afterward, the O'Banners started the Fresh Start Financial Education Foundation to teach other couples how to successfully deal with debt and take charge of their own personal financial future.
What types of strategies do you find work the best for people?
Unity, first and foremost, being together, minimizing expenses. Kirstie's excellent at that. I mean, she changed where we shop for groceries, shaved our grocery bill down by in half, basically.
Yep. So definitely minimizing
expenses for sure.
Budgeting together. We ordered our debts from smallest to largest and just attacked each one, in order, and just used the momentum from paying off one to go towards the next, and just kept it going until we got to the last one.
Now, I bet some of those things that you did at that time created habits after 15 months.
Oh, absolutely.
That even though now you can afford to spend more money being debt-free,
absolutely.
I bet some of those habits still stick, and they're making you even more financially sound since you paid off the debt, correct?
Right.
Yeah, that's what we tell people. This is not just until you eliminate debt. This is a lifestyle.
Right.
So this is not just for a short period of time. This is for the rest of your lives. We still have those budget meetings. We have those periods every 2 weeks. And so this is a lifestyle, and we still minimize expenses. We call various companies to try to say, hey, our bill's too high. What do you help us out?
Last year, David was joined by the father and son doctor team, Ted and Brad Klontz. They're both financial psychologists and co-authors of Mind Over Money. The Klontzes shed light on financial disorders, how the psychology of money works against some people, and what they can do about it.
What are some of the most common financial psychological disorders that you see when you talk to people?
Well, I would think that the primary one that I deal with are people who spend more than they can. And what I mean by that is they spend more than they can support. But in today's age, it allows us, the world we live in allows us to spend more than we have up to a certain particular point in time, and then the spending that we've done is crushing.
Kind of sort of catches up with you after a while if that happens, doesn't it?
Yes. And the second, I would think the most common is one where the people just refuse to pay any attention to it whatsoever. And I think the third would be the people who are afraid to spend anything.
We'll be right back after the break. Of all the things that can tarnish or even sabotage a successful retirement, one of the most common is health. That's because the issues related to health are usually too broad and complex for most people to prepare for. One thing that makes it so complex is that there are so many factors and contingencies to consider, like inflation and healthcare inflation in particular, the long-term direction of interest rates and the financial markets, the risks and benefits of different investment strategies, your children and potential great-grandchildren, and your lifestyle. They can all impact your physical, emotional, and financial health in equal measure, and each of these areas is essential to a successful retirement. That's why a few months ago, David started the Health Series, focusing on the many challenges of medical and health care in retirement. In the first episode of that series, David spoke with a doctor, Jolie Silva, a psychologist who specializes in dealing with the psychological challenges of retirement, which for some can include depression, anxiety, and a loss of identity.
What's the antidote? Well, how do you fix that when you're getting into retirement? What do they need to do in preparation for retirement So that becomes less of an issue.
Well, and that's the key right there, the word preparation and planning, because most people plan financially for retirement, which obviously is huge, but people don't plan or prepare for physical, social, psychological aspects of retirement. So one thing that has increased in popularity over the last decade is something called bridge employment. And that is, instead of having a drastic I'm working, I'm not working, to have some kind of part-time job in between the two that kind of helps with the transition. Another thing that's been shown to be super helpful, especially in decreasing dementia and hypertension, is volunteer work. Mm-hmm. So doing volunteer work, and when I say volunteer work, it's only beneficial for people who genuinely want to do that. If you feel as though it's obligatory or you're being forced into it, it doesn't show the same benefits. But doing those kinds of things and forming a social network is also huge, because most people who work, their social networks are in their jobs. So then when they retire, they lose that social network. So it's forming these new social networks that you can say is kind of an antidote to that stuff.
In another health-based episode that focused on aging gracefully, author and psychologist Dr. Susan Krauss Whitbourne shared her tips on how to maintain good physical, mental, and emotional health during retirement. She says maintaining your physical health and wellness is extremely important.
We can't control all the chronic conditions that can afflict us or everything that life throws our way, but we can try as much as we can to maintain our physical, emotional, mental stamina. So I think that's really important. You can't be free of disease or illness, but you can really give it a good hard try. And then I think attitude is part of it, being kind of optimistic about aging, looking at all angles, but at the same time, and as I found in my research, kind of focusing on the positive, but being prepared for what other kinds of experiences might come your way, which might not all be that positive.
What are some things that our loved ones that we can do for our loved ones that are aging to help them really age gracefully, as the title of the show would indicate?
I think number one is don't sell your loved ones short because they're older. I mean, just as we discussed, social attitudes towards aging are still so negative, and ageism is everywhere, that if we carry this into our relationships with our elder relatives, it's only going to bring them down and kind of create a self-fulfilling prophecy. So on the one hand, you want to understand people's limitations, but on the other hand, you don't want to sell them short. And I think number two is, although, as you mentioned, the family, it's not the Waltons exactly anymore, many older adults do live within close distance of at least one relative from a younger generation, and many of them have very close contact. And even if they can't be physically close, social media have really helped. So staying in touch with older adults, don't let guilt get you. Oh, I haven't called my mother or grandma in a couple weeks, I better not call, I feel so bad. Get over it and make the approach if you haven't been approached already. So staying in touch and taking advantage of the many ways that we have to stay in touch now. And then number three is use opportunities to learn from elders. I mean, your show is about financial advising. And there's a lot to be learned from older, successful, retired adults, but there are also many skills that older adults want to share with younger family members, even if it skips a generation, as it does in many cases, and you're teaching the grandkids things that you weren't able to teach your own kids.
Another, unfortunately, common threat to physical, emotional, and financial health during retirement is drug and alcohol dependence and addiction. Treatment specialist Mark Leeds shared some of his insights with us on this difficult issue.
Physical dependence is common with many medications, not only opioids. There's antidepressants, there's blood pressure medications. If a person were to stop the medication suddenly, they would suffer from physical withdrawal symptoms. When it comes to addiction, that's different from just physical dependence. When a person is addicted, they tend to compulsively use a substance and repeat a harmful action over and over again, in spite of knowing that it's harming themselves and it's hurting the people around them. It's definitely true that older people over the age of 55 may be at a higher risk for developing addiction if they're suffering from grief, isolation, depression, anxiety, If an older person does go for the treatment of chronic pain and they're prescribed an opioid, the doctor who prescribes their medication should be aware of that and pay close attention to that possibility that that patient may develop an addiction.
Another frequent health-related challenge faced by many retirees is that of caring for an ailing partner or another loved one. It can take a toll on every aspect of your health, but there are ways to cope and deal with it, as we've heard from guest Tony Rodriguez, a former executive who cares for his own ailing wife.
My name is Tony Rodriguez. I am 68 years old. My spouse was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she already was suffering from lupus and fibromyalgia since 1995. I decided to kind of accelerate my retirement. All the day-to-day operations of the household that we tend to take for granted now all of a sudden falls upon my shoulders. After the Alzheimer's, she happens to be a great cook. She doesn't remember how to cook anymore. So I have had to step into that. Sometimes it's more difficult, sometimes it's easier. In her case, her job is just to be happy, which she demonstrates constantly.
One of the keys to ensuring good financial health in retirement is to have a good estate plan in place, a process that can start with a conversation with the right financial advisor. Author and former estate planning attorney, Catherine Hodder, joined us to share some of her insights on this important topic.
Estate planning isn't just about taxes, and estate planning has to do with as much as you being alive as much as you being dead. So, for example, if you face an incapacity, which is a very likely event, you need someone to handle your finances, handle your medical decisions. And that's just something that the only way is addressed is through estate planning with legal documents.
One of the biggest health challenges in retirement is the ever-increasing cost of health and medical care. As we've often pointed out, healthcare costs rise at a much faster and steeper rate than the general inflation rate, essentially doubling every 12 years. David has had financial coach and investing strategist Chris Hogan on the show several times, and we shared one of his most recent interviews earlier in the show. Here's what Chris says you need to be aware of when it comes to healthcare costs.
I would encourage people out there just to be mindful of your coverage, understand what you have and what it protects. What are things that are going to be inside of your network and covered versus things that are out of pocket or outside of your network? We have to have an understanding, and we want to go into it with our eyes wide open to know what it is, what it covers, and what are some potential gaps. And I think the best way to go about that is to make sure you're educating yourself, that you're sitting down with an insurance professional to really understand what you have and what's available.
We'll be back right after the break. When we come back, we'll talk about media bias and why you shouldn't necessarily trust the financial advice from those Wall Street cheerleaders you see on TV.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow the Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
I believe another major challenge facing baby boomers is bias and misinformation in the financial media. In fact, I feel so strongly about this topic that I wrote about it in my Amazon #1 best-selling book, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up, which I recommend you read. This particular challenge of identifying false or misleading information in the media has been made much more difficult over the last few decades with the explosion of cable television and the internet. Many Americans base their savings and investment decisions to some extent on news and information they get through financial programs, blogs, websites, and newsletters. But if the source of that information has a hidden motive, that puts its own needs or that of its advertisers ahead of your needs, then how trustworthy can it really be? Just being aware of the prevalence of bias in the financial media and how it spreads throughout much of the financial services industry is a good first step toward protecting yourself from potentially harmful advice and information. Back in April, Dave spoke with Robert Kiyosaki, author of the best-selling Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, about his latest book, Fake. It addresses the problem of false information and ideas not only in the financial media, but in everything an entire generation has been taught about saving and investing.
What does school teach you about money? Nothing. Balance a checkbook, big deal. FICO score, big deal. What we have to learn about today is debt, taxes, and crashes. You look at President Trump and myself, we're real estate guys. We use 100% debt. We pay no taxes legally, and crashes make us richer. And that's really what they should be teaching kids, but they don't tell you that. You've got to be very careful who you get your financial education from. My rich dad always said the reason they're called stockbrokers and real estate brokers is because they're more broke than you are.
Sure.
And you look at most school teachers are broke. So they should listen to programs like yours or mine or whatever, but better find out who's real and who's fake. That's the most important thing. As a pilot in Vietnam, I knew my instructors could fly because I flew with them every day. And as I got closer to going to war, my instructors got better. It's the same thing today. Choose your teachers wisely.
Last year, entrepreneur and former Fox News analyst Tobin Smith returned to the show to talk about his book, Fear and Unbalanced. He says his book exposes how some TV producers are more interested in ratings and politics than in giving answers and objective information.
Specifically is on what I did and what I was involved in at Fox News. I assume that a lot of your viewers are Fox News fans and watch, etc. And I would guarantee you, David, that if you ask them, do you realize that almost every opinion program that I ever participated in, about 2,000 of them, by the way, was specifically scripted and rigged by the producers, by Fox News producers, so that I, the conservative person, would win the argument. And they did it in a number of ways, starting with, did you ever notice that the liberal opponent of mine on Fox News was always a third or fourth string person? I mean, if you were a Democratic strategist, which basically meant you were an attractive male or female, but even better, attractive female, we put you on Fox. And then we gave you a subject like me. I run an investment research company, a hedge fund, a mutual fund, a macroeconomic research guy. And they would bring up a subject that was exactly what I do for a living, and that poor liberal person had no idea other than what the Democratic talking point was. But that was great, because if they brought up the Democratic talking point, we would hit our first mark of our performance art show, which was we wanted to get that person to stand up, David, and feel like they wanted to throw a brick through the television. That was exactly what people told me for years, that viewers would say, oh man, I just wanted to throw a brick. Well, if we got your blood going, and that liberal opponent put out these apostasies and heretical remarks against conservative ideology. Mm-hmm. And then I swooped in at the end and I said, listen, sweetheart, that's great. Let the big boy take it over here now. First off, you don't know this. Second, you don't know this. Number three, and I hit a couple of conservative ideological points. Boom. The reader at home, the viewer at home says, yeah, but Toby, you killed that libtard. They get out Jack. I mean, they literally get a shot, not of adrenaline, but of dopamine, the really good stuff, the good chemical that makes you feel great. And this segment is over.
So
Go to
basically,
commercial, and we have you two minutes back. Yeah.
So basically, they can't officially rig it because they never know what the liberal opponent, so to speak, is actually going to say.
Oh,
but
that's wrong.
But I guess if you take an all-star pitcher and you put him up against a double-A batter, chances are you stack the deck sufficiently, that batter is going to strike out.
Right,
and you're that all-star pitcher.
Right, but David, that you have that wrong. We got every talk show, you get what's known as the point of view, the talking points, right? And they get emailed and back by all the combatants. The difference was I was live in Fox. A lot of times, the other conservative people were off like me. They're off on Skype or out on a satellite. I was in studio and I was in the production offices, and at 4:00 when everything was all tied up, then I would get my final instructions. I would get the final point. I would see what the final point of view from my opponent was. And then the producers would give me these script that basically say, here's how you kill them. Here's what I want you to hit.
And last year, Hara Murphy of Sun America Asset Management shared some of her helpful tips on how to identify biased information and find good, objective financial guidance.
Average investor needs to make sure that whatever their plan is, they stick with. That is the most important thing. We spend a lot of time making sure that we have the right message about our products, right? So we have to make sure that we understand what goes into our portfolios, what we're holding, and more importantly, sometimes the process by which we get there. So we spend a lot of time talking about process. We talk with a lot of advisors about the way that we construct our portfolios, our systematic approach, how we view different factors, and how that all feeds into the end result of the holdings that we actually have in there. So it's very important to us to make sure that we get the message correct. And that's what we're really going for when we talk to advisors.
So what you're basically doing is you're educating them so that they could better educate their clients and help the clients make informed decisions.
Absolutely. And again, it's not just about the individual holdings that are in the portfolio, it's the process and how we get there, and to make sure that we do that on a consistent basis.
Coming up after the break, we'll talk about alternative investments and why investors are seeking out these types of assets, along with some of the potential downsides.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model. Call now for a free copy of David's latest book. Go to soundincomestrategies.com/income to find out more.
Read David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Discover practical solutions to the financial challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. Learn the truth about Wall Street, the financial media, and the secrets they try to hide from everyday investors. This isn't just another book about investing. Working Americans who have lived through 2 major stock market crashes and the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression in the past 16 years don't need another book about investing. David Scranton's approach to financial planning is a holistic system designed for maximum protection, strategic growth, and reliable income regardless of market conditions. Stop planning for retirement with your fingers crossed. Read Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Available now.
If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. We'll see you all next Sunday.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model. Call now for a free copy of David's latest book. Go to soundincomestrategies.com/income to find out more.
As regular viewers know, we all talk about alternative investment strategies frequently on this show. But when we say alternative, usually we mean it in layman's terms. That's because when most people think about investing, they automatically think of things like stocks and mutual funds. So to most people, bonds and bond-like instruments and other types of income-generating strategies are the alternatives. But occasionally we'll focus on alternative investing in the technical sense of the word, meaning tools and strategies outside the realm of stocks, bonds, and cash, most of which are considered high-risk options. These include everything from private equity and venture capital to collectibles, and in some cases, real estate. Some alternative strategies have become somewhat popular with baby boomers, which is why we occasionally focus on the topic and on the risks involved. Last year, for instance, Paul Bishop, a senior economist with the National Association of Realtors, joined David to talk about opportunities and risk in the real estate market.
If you look back over the last several years, home builders were not able to build nearly as many homes as needed, and so they're just now trying to catch up after years of really subpar building levels. And one of the results of that is there just is too few homes available for sale on the market at virtually all price points, and so it's putting a lot of stress in different areas of the market. And most buyers in just about every part of the country are seeing and feeling that. Most homeowners are staying in their home for a longer period of time, and certainly that would include the baby boomers. Now, at some point, of course, most older baby boomers and the generations that follow will probably downsize and move to a desirable location to retire. But at this point, it doesn't seem like there's much urgency on baby boomers' part to make that transition. In fact, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of analysis done on this concept of aging in place. So how can baby boomers make their home more accessible even as they do get older? Because a number of baby boomers who have bought that dream home are maybe reluctant to trade it in for a much smaller home or move out of a community where they've built a lot of social connections. So I don't have no doubt that at some point most baby boomers will make that transition. But at this point, I think there's some evidence to suggest that they're actually pushing that decision further down the line than maybe previous generations have. The number of renter households has continued to grow. Part of that is a result of the millennials not being able to make that transition into home ownership, but there's also a lot of demand for rental properties and being a renter household among older generations as well. So from an investor standpoint, what we've seen is a lot of investment activity over the last several years, especially coming out of the financial crisis. And by our estimate, about 20% of the residential property that's sold each year is sold to investors.
But maybe real estate isn't really your thing. Maybe you're thinking about the possibility of investing in something smaller, things like coins or cars or even antique toys. There are still potential risks involved in that type of alternative investing. Mark Hall Patton, a Century Artifacts and Collectibles scholar and well-known Pawn Stars consultant, joined David to talk about investing in collectibles.
Collect what you like. Don't worry about what somebody's telling you. If you like it, go ahead and collect it, because it's very hard to generate a lot of money in collectibles unless you're buying really high-end, very rare material. I think that we're going to see an upswing in electronic devices. I think that you're going to see people in another 15 or 20 years looking back at their childhood and saying, oh, I want one of these. I want an iPhone, whatever, just to have it on the shelf, so that, my friends and I can look at it and laugh about the old days.
Sure.
And that's a lot of times that is what tends to drive collectibles. It's what you remember from your childhood. I would never say to, for example, invest in Coca-Cola memorabilia. There's a market for it today, but I don't think that market's going to hold up, because people today aren't going to look back at the iconic brand look and see it in the same way. That you have to, whatever you're going to invest in, if you like it, then invest. But if you want to make money on it, pick ones, you want to pick areas where there is a group of people coming up who are going to want to collect in that area in the future.
Coming up after the break, why some pundits believe corporate debt may be a ticking time bomb for the U.S. economy.
If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation. Again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model.
Call now for a free copy of David's latest book. Go to soundincomestrategies.com/income to find out more.
The United States is one of the greatest places in the world to raise capital. and we raise capital in many forms. But we may be coming to a saturation point for the expansion of debt and the raising of capital, and to a tipping point in the expansion of corporate debt. It's something I've discussed in my Amazon #1 bestseller, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up, along with other vital stock market perspectives that you need to know. Over the past decade, companies have been taking on more debt, even as the economy was in slow recovery mode from the Great Recession. Low corporate bond yields since that time have forced corporations to borrow heavily in the bond market, increasing outstanding corporate debt by over 47% of GDP since 2008, when it is already high to begin with. All of this begs the question, could massive corporate debt be a tipping point for the next major market drop or even another financial crisis and recession? Some say yes, especially when considering the debt problem alongside so many other unstable factors weighing on the financial markets and global economy. Making matters potentially worse is the fact that corporations have been using the proceeds of their borrowing to boost their stock prices through corporate share buybacks. As they relate to debt, some believe that buybacks further weaken what some people say should be the real measure of a strength for the company, its balance sheet, not its earnings. As bond specialist Jeffrey Gunlack of Double Line Capital put it, the balance sheets of corporations are balanced on ever-dwindling equities as they buy back shares and increase their leverage ratios, and that's not good. I spoke with Arthur Hogan, the Managing Director and Chief Market Strategist at National Holdings Corporation, to get his take. Here's what he says you need to know.
I think there's three things to think about, and there's some misgivings about what buybacks mean. Now, buybacks in and of themselves aren't necessarily a bad idea. If a company actually has excess profits and doesn't have another productive use for it inside its company with a good return on investment, they should return that capital to its investors. Those investors then take that capital and find better investments to make in other companies. So that's the simple economics. Where it becomes bad is two ways. First and foremost can be timing. Companies can do a very bad job of repurchasing their own shares, buying at peaks in a downtrending market, and actually waste a lot of capital, and that's probably the most common. The other is if there's any malfeasance in the use of this. Perhaps a company decides to buy back shares in front of its earnings, or to buy back shares in front of an options expiration for management compensation. Those are things that are the exception, not the norm. But I think in general, buybacks have increased and set a record last year for two main reasons. We had a new tax bill, so there was a lot of cash that was brought back in overseas, and the market capitalization of the overall market was much larger. So when you think about the buybacks in proportion to the market cap, they've been about the same for the last 10 years.
Coming up after the break, I'll share some of my final thoughts on our guests and the topics we've discussed on today's show. If you're a regular viewer, you know we frequently talk about the financial markets. In the post-financial crisis era of artificial economic stimulus, today's global markets are fraught with new complexities and unprecedented levels of uncertainty. It's important that investors at or near retirement be aware of ongoing changes and developments in the markets and their potential impact on your savings. We've been fortunate to have some of the great economic minds of our day stop in to share their market insights. I've had fun today revisiting some of our best moments and top interviews, and we look forward to compiling new best moments with new guests and new topics aimed at helping you protect your hard-earned money and achieve your retirement goals. And if you need even more advice, I recommend checking out my Amazon #1 bestseller, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up, which is full of excellent information for everyday investors. Thanks for watching. If you're close to retirement and really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, it's absolutely essential that you stay informed and up to date. And right here is where you can do it on The Income Generation. I'm Jeff Small, filling in for David Scranton, and we'll see you next week.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model.
Call now for a free copy of David's latest book. Go to soundincomestrategies.com/income to find out more.
If you're not using someone who's well trained in fixed income and you're born before 1966, it may just be time for you to break up with that advisor and move on. I would suggest someone who will care for you through these important years of your life. If you need help finding someone, call or write us. I'd also like to remind you of the special report entitled The Income Generation. This is available free to you, our loyal viewers, online. If you haven't downloaded your report, pick it up after the show. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. We'll see you all next Sunday.